All right, welcome back, everybody, to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure on Thursday, April 23rd, post-fire alarm. Sarah, sorry about that. Eric, sorry about that. That was unexpected. All is well. And we're back. So I'm Representative Kathleen James from Manchester.
Scott Campbell from St. Johnbury.
Richard Bailey, Lamoille 2. Chris Morrow, Wyndham Reserve Benning.
Michael Southworth, Caledonia 2.
Christopher Howland, Rutland 4.
Sarah Torrey, Washington 2.
Brad Plepner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Laura Sibilia, Wyndham 2.
All right, and joining us?
Gabrielle Molina, down Franklin Martin.
Super. So just, I'm sorry we're getting a little bit of a late start. Just quickly, I know you submitted written testimony, so we're looking forward to going through that with you. And we also quickly wanted to chat with you. We got your letter. We are in receipt of your letter about S202. And I think the committee all agrees that we're going to add that language that you suggested, but I think some folks had questions. We do have our next witnesses at 11, but if we're running late here, I don't think we need to, we could probably go a few minutes late. So anyway, for the record, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Sarah Adams. I am a senior state policy advisor with ISO New England, and I am joined today by Eric Johnson, who I will let introduce himself for the record.
Morning, folks. Eric Johnson, Head of External Affairs, ISO.
Thanks for being here. Okay, are you going to share your screen or?
Yes. So you'd like to start with the nuclear overview versus the S202 questions?
Well, you know what? I don't want to run out of time. Let's quickly S202, because I think we can make haste. So we've read over your letter, and I think we feel that 3700 does cover it, but hear your testimony, happy to add the language. I believe that's the committee consensus. And for speaking for myself, I didn't want to be in the position of, overruling a safety concern from ISO. So did folks have questions or comments? Representative Sibilia?
I think my question was before it was clear that we had consensus that we were having. So I'm all set. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Well, I guess we don't have questions and comments. So we'll take that italicized language from your letter and just drop that in wherever legislative council says to drop it in. And then we're going to move out this bill pretty quickly, I think, and get it back to the Senate as we approach adjournment. I want to make sure this one doesn't get hung up anywhere.
Sure. Thank you. And we really appreciate you all considering and incorporating our feedback. And to the extent that it is helpful, the clearest way that I can distill why our engineers would really like to see the IEEE standard in addition to UL 37 is because UL 37 says that the inverter has the capability to do the things that we'd like to see, but it does not guarantee that those capabilities are enabled on the inverter. So that is the extra protection that the IEEE 1547 gives us. It just ensures that the right switches are flipped at install. So that those ride-through capabilities are enabled. So that's really why we like to see both. They are complementary. One without the other doesn't necessarily achieve what we'd like to see from a reliability perspective. So we really appreciate you adding that language.
Great, thanks. All righty, switching gears.
Great. Then I will share my screen. Let's see. Okay, everyone can see that?
Yep.
All right. So today, what Eric and I will do is we're just going to provide a brief overview of nuclear generation in New England. We'll cover how nuclear fits into today's power system, some of the history of nuclear generation in the region, and also some operational considerations moving forward. You all have seen a lot of me this session, so you probably know all of this, but for the benefit of folks who might be joining on the stream, ISO New England is the independent nonprofit regional grid operator for the New England states. We have three core responsibilities. We plan the bulk transmission system, we run the wholesale electricity markets, and we operate the grid in real time. We are technology and fuel neutral. We don't own any generation and we don't have an environmental mandate. Our mission is really about keeping the lights on at competitive costs, regardless of fuel type. And just to give you all a sense of what types of resources are providing electricity in New England, in 2025, most of our energy came from natural gas, nuclear, renewables, and imports, with coal and oil now very nominal resources. We've largely transitioned away from oil and coal, driven predominantly by economics and also the environmental policy that the New England states have enacted. Nuclear remains one of our largest zero carbon contributors to actual energy production, not just installed capacity in the region. And I did just want to underscore the shift that we are expecting from a summer peak to a winter peak. Historically, hot, humid summer days and air conditioning produced the highest electricity demand in New England. But electrification of heating is expected to push the system towards a winter peak, starting around the mid-2030s, so within the next decade. And that has implications for fuel availability and reliability. Extreme cold events are a lot harder operationally than summer peaks, especially for fuel-constrained resources like in New England liquefied natural gas. During winter peak conditions, imports and behind-the-meter solar might also be less available. Cold weather also constrains our neighbors. Canada is already winter peaking, so moving towards a winter peak will make imports a little bit tighter. And short daylight hours and snow cover also reduce solar output. So that might put in the future, as we move towards that winter peak, greater reliance on dispatchable fuel secure resources.
Sorry, why is, you said something I didn't understand, which is that liquid natural gas is constrained in the winter? What? I don't
Yes.
understand why.
Heating for heat.
Yeah, so there's a couple of
It's
reasons.
used. More of
Um,
it.
That's right. So home heating, the LDCs, the local distribution companies, have contracts with folks who are using gas for home heating, and that those contracts typically get priority in the winter. So we're competing
Oh, I see. Okay.
with folks who are using gas for heating during the winter versus using it for electricity generation. We have a lot more gas that's available for electricity generation in the summer versus the winter because there isn't that home heating constraint.
Gotcha.
And so now I'm going to turn it over to Eric, who is going to focus a little bit more on nuclear's role on the grid today and also some of the history of nuclear in the region. So Eric, just let me know and I will drive the slides.
Sounds good. Jump ahead. So there are some features of nuclear power that are different from other resources that operate on the grid. And one is that the high voltage transmission system that we operate here in New England is based on 345,000 volts or 345 kV. And that system was designed around the construction of the nuclear plants. So if you look at the transmission map, I'm not sure if it's in this presentation, but we can make it available. If you follow the transmission system, you'll see that it leads to the locations of the original nuclear plants in the region. The second thing is that as Sarah mentioned earlier, a pretty significant supply of capacity and energy come from nuclear. And when we say capacity, we're talking about the total capability of a power plant when it's operating at full capability. Energy is how much it would produce in the course of a year. For nuclear, there's a strong correlation between their capacity and their energy. They are what we would think of as a base load resource. They pretty much run all the time. If you compare that to a resource like wind, it might have a high capacity ability, nameplate rating, but it only produces electric energy when the wind is blowing. Another feature of nuclear plants is they tend to, I'm going to use a little bit of jargon here, but I'll explain it. They self-schedule in the wholesale electricity market. and they are what we call price taker. So in our daily market, every resource that wants to sell power to the grid would submit an offer price. Nuclear plants will often submit a zero offer price. Now, that doesn't mean their costs are zero or they expect to be paid zero, but they need to be dispatched every day. And by putting in that zero offer price, it's a guarantee that they will be dispatched first. Now, they end up getting whatever the marginal price is at that point in time. And so that's why we call them a price taker. I did mention they are base load units, very high availability, and especially under the market structure here in New England. If you look at the 1990s, we had a lot of issues with nuclear plants that were down for safety reasons, and the NRC had orders in place for several plants in New England. When that was resolved and the nuclear plants came back online, we saw very high availability in the market environment, largely because they only get paid when they're operating. They tend to have very long run times. So once a nuclear plant is commissioned, it typically only comes down for refueling, which could be every 18 months approximately. Now, if there is an emergency situation, they can shut down on a moment's notice for safety reasons. And
we have a question. Rep Campbell.
Yeah, just a quick question. I think you said that nuclear power plants want to be first in line to have their power, their supply used. Is that, did I understand that correctly?
Yes, because it's very difficult for them to ramp up and ramp down on a daily basis.
Right. Okay. So that's why they price in at $0, but then they'll take whatever the marginal price is at the moment.
Correct.
Yeah.
Eric, this might be a good place to note that in recent years, some of our states have entered into out-of-market contracts or policy arrangements to support our existing nuclear facilities, which are separate from ISO's wholesale markets, and are kind of implemented at the state level. And those types of arrangements are really designed to recognize the environmental or reliability attributes of nuclear plants, such as zero carbon energy, that we don't explicitly compensate through our wholesale electricity markets. So this might be a good time to just flag that as well.
A great point. So there's really only two nuclear stations operating in New England, one in Connecticut, one in New Hampshire. And we have the details of that in a slide that's coming up. Connecticut, the legislature adopted a long-term agreement, a 10-year contract with the owners of the nuclear plant in Connecticut. That was signed by the governor. That's in place. So that provides a longer-term commitment for that resource to operate than the ISO could offer through the wholesale markets. So we administer a market where buyers and sellers come together, but as an ISO, we don't sign long-term contracts with any facilities.
Rep Spelia.
Eric, do you know how long, I'm sure you do, how long that contract goes through with Connecticut?
Yeah, the 10-year contract, and I believe it goes through 2028 or 29.
And do you know if they have the automatic right to renew, or are they unable to protect that?
Well, they are, I think, in discussion about the next phase of that contract. One of the issues for Connecticut is that they entered that contract as a single state for not only the nuclear plant in Connecticut, but they also contracted with a portion of the New Hampshire plant, the Seabrook plant. They would like other states to participate in that long-term agreement. And I know that Massachusetts has passed some enabling legislation in that regard. And I think Connecticut and the owners of the nuclear plant are actively talking to other states about that.
That's great to know. But I'm really interested in the answer to the question of, do you know if they have the right to automatically renew if they wanted to?
That's a great question. Actually, Connecticut passed a law since the original contract that said they would not move forward on a renewal of a agreement with the Millstone plant unless other states were party to the agreement.
And
So they
so
couldn't renew it. There's no automatic renewal for that contract.
let me just maybe, explain, I'm sure you understand my question. So I'm worried about competition in the market and, these low cost base load power. And so is this going to enter the market or have they preserved it as long as they're able to get these agreements with other states? Do you know?
I think that's probably a question for some policymakers in Connecticut to think about. But I would caution that when we talk about resources offering into the market at a zero price or being a price taker, I don't want there to be any confusion that we think nuclear plants are low cost resources. They are very capital intensive investments. And while they're not necessarily concerned about the price of electricity in the wholesale market hour to hour, they have signaled in Connecticut that the wholesale market revenues alone are not sufficient to allow them to continue to operate long into the future. And that's why they have been in discussion with the state of Connecticut about the Millstone plant.
Okay, I have more questions, but it sounds like they're for Connecticut.
You would like to take that up offline, I'm happy to continue to explore that as well. Maybe the last thing I'll highlight here is that when we look at the nuclear plants, they weren't designed and built in isolation. The expectation was there would be a lot of electricity to serve New England during the day, but because they want to run continuously, there would be a lot of energy added to the grid in the overnight period when you wouldn't have very high demand, since we typically had heat during the afternoon when they were built. So where are you going to use that extra energy? So they designed pump storage hydro facilities. There are two of them one in Connecticut and one in Massachusetts. And so they essentially take the hydro production capability of a power plant and they turn it into a pump. So to the ISO, it looks like demand on the grid. So they're moving water from the river up into a reservoir, and then they're storing that as a type of energy storage, and then they can release that the next day. So that was a way to maximize the efficient use of all that nuclear power. The second thing that they did when they designed the nuclear plants is they wanted to make sure there was a fast responding resource that could back up the nuclear plants if they tripped offline. So if the nuclear plant in Connecticut were to go offline, that's about 2,000 megawatts. The storage hydro facilities have capability that can back up most of that nuclear production. So you don't want to have a contingency of a really large asset on the grid that's going to cause reliability problems. So the pump storage hydro is a big part of ensuring backup energy for the nuclear plants.
And how long does that pump storage last?
The pump storage is essentially a daily operating resource. So they'll fully fill the reservoir in the overnight period. And I think they can run for up to about 8 hours.
Okay, thank you.
Just on pump storage, I'm curious, do we have any pump storage in New England that's associated with renewable production?
Not currently. I mean, you could say it's associated with carbon-free energy if you're talking about the nuclear plants. But I think it's kind of unique that these two plants were developed at the same time. We are seeing co-located batteries and solar and wind projects in the region, so that's maybe a similar concept. But pump storage hydro is a unique type of asset. It's not a battery. You're basically using river water and a reservoir and the power plant in the middle to either charge or discharge the reservoir. Okay, so if we think about the history, at one point, New England had 8 separate nuclear plants that were operating around the region. And I'm saying a station here, station different from unit. So in Connecticut, the Millstone Nuclear Power Station has 2 units as an example. So if you look down near the bottom of this chart, Millstone 2 and 3, total 2,000 megawatts. Seabrook in New Hampshire is about 1,300 megawatts. So we have more than 3,300 megawatts of operating nuclear capacity in the region. Those are the 2 that are remaining from the entire fleet. So everything that's listed above that is a resource that has retired. And of course, you'd be familiar with the Vermont Yankee plant.
We have another question here. I'm assuming you can't see me, so I'm trying not to just interrupt, but Rep. Sibilia.
Eric, for all the retired plants, is all the transmission infrastructure still in place largely?
Typically, that's a great point, because when a plant retires, the transmission interconnection capability is often available for other resources to connect to. And we've seen transmission lines seeking to connect to these facilities from Quebec as an example. And the offshore wind is often trying to make landfall at some of the retired nuclear plants to connect to the grid.
Mm.
It's a very valuable point of interconnection.
Okay.
Are you
sorry.
able to, is there any public information about any of these sites being explored by data center?
It's a good question. I've heard discussion about using these sites for interconnecting generation. I have not heard explicitly data center activity at these sites.
Thanks.
Okay, Sarah, next slide. So the 2 remaining stations include 3 different assets: Millstone 2 and 3 and Seabrook. Millstone 1 was one of the retired decommissioned units. So one thing to highlight here is that the operating licenses do not come from the ISO. They come from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or the NRC. So we just wanted to highlight the time frame. So you can see they have commercial licenses out pretty far into the future. And so that is a factor in the decision for the power plants to discuss the contracts with Connecticut. And finally, I would highlight here that the technology of the reactors in both of these instances is a pressurized water reactor.
I have a question about that. So when they come up for license renewal, I see the Unit 2 coming on the soonest in 2035. What does that process look like? How rigorous is it? Did these things ever not get their license renewed?
It's a good question. That all happens at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in DC. So we monitor that activity because we want to know the outlook for these assets. Most power plants don't have licenses that operate in these really long timeframes. So it's a little different from the normal permitting that would happen at the state level. And when the plants are built, they have a license of, I think, 10 or 20 years. And then they're expected to come back for another long-term license renewal. So they simply have to demonstrate to the NRC that the plant can be operated safely within the original design specifications in order for them to get that renewal. And I say simply, it's not a simple process. It's a pretty detailed regulatory proceeding overseen by the NRC.
And do these kinds of plants have any kind of typical lifespan? Or in other words, is there a point at which, across the country they get old and they're retired, or are they continually upgraded in an attempt to maintain their licensing?
There's really 2 components to that I would highlight, and I'm not the engineer, but
Yeah.
they've got the fuel that they need to manage for the production of electricity, and then they have to manage the fuel rods when they're extracted from the facility, and those are all typically maintained on site. So the fuel management is one component of the operation, and the other is the physical capability of the turbine technology. So certainly over the course of decades, components may be upgraded or replaced, but there is a really good website at the NRC that tracks the history of each unit and all of the details like we're showing here and more. So if you wanted a view of how long these plants last, I would say that's a pretty good source of information.
Okay, thank you.
Right, next slide. So I mentioned earlier that the refueling of the power plants is typically when they come offline. And if it takes if they're operating for 18 months, they may be down for a couple weeks for their refueling. And we coordinate the maintenance for all power plants in New England, but we try to make sure that the nuclear plants are offline in the spring and the fall, because that tends to be when we see the lower loads in the region. So it would have less impact on reliability and the market in that time frame. So all of the outages of power plants and generators in New England are coordinated through ISO New England. Next slide.
And I would just note, I'm sorry if I missed if you said it, Eric, but we do conduct regular restoration training with all of the nuclear operators just to ensure that that's really well coordinated.
Yeah, great point. Thank you, Sarah.
All right, so I think I am going to pick up again here. This, I know you've seen the duck curve chart a couple of times this session. We've discussed when we were talking about the portable solar legislation. But I just wanted to show it in this context to illustrate how operational challenges might grow in the next decade or so compared to what we're seeing today. We're expecting continued growth in behind the meter solar, and that could ultimately drive net demand below traditional baseload levels. So you can see our baseline kind of nuclear level marked on this chart. And that would create steep ramps in the evening when solar output falls. And as Eric had noted, nuclear doesn't really have the ability to do a steep ramp. It's a steady baseload resource. So while it's steady, our system is going to increasingly require flexible and fast responding resources to maintain balance. So that's just something that our operators are thinking about moving forward.
Can you go back for some?
Yeah.
Sure.
Sarah, I have a question on this one. Is the 2032 green line just behind the meter solar, or is there any accounting for battery storage that might accompany solar? Increasingly, it is accompanying solar, and is it something that is included in this calculation?
That I'm not certain on. I do think that this chart relates specifically to behind the meter solar, but we do reference the report that is linked in the footnote here is our economic planning for the clean energy transition, which does look at a number of different resources and how they might impact reliability and economics in the future. And batteries would have been a technology that we would have considered as part of that report.
Yeah, because where the green line dips below the dotted yellow line, obviously, is where you have electrons you're trying to get rid of. You have power you're trying to
Yes.
sell, or you're trying to pay somebody to take, in effect. Right?
Right. So this actually might be a good transition to our next slide, where we think a little bit about what is being proposed to connect to the grid. And we are seeing a lot of proposals for battery storage. And we'd certainly see a need for that type of technology to kind of smooth that peak and make those ramps so they are not so steep and we don't have those kinds of operational concerns. But the main reason I wanted to include this chart for this presentation today is just to highlight that we're really seeing a dramatic shift towards wind, solar, and batteries. We're not seeing a lot of new dispatchable generation that is entering the queue today. So that does raise some questions about reliability under extreme conditions, and it's something that we are thinking about as we model the future of the New England power grid.
Sarah, just quick question on that last slide. So the going from 36 to 13 or 14 megawatts, that's, you just got rid of all the speculative pipeline projects that weren't real projects. Is that what happened there?
That's right. So what you're seeing on the left-hand slide was the queue before our FERC Order 2023 reforms took place. And the pie chart on the right is our post 2023 queue. So this includes about 5,000 megawatts that are participating in our first cluster study, our first transitional cluster study under that new first ready, first served interconnection queue process. So there are a number of projects that were able to stay in the queue because they were far enough along in their study process, but many of those, as you have noted, more speculative projects dropped out and are no longer being considered in that queue. So I think about 5,500 megawatts are part of the transitional cluster study, and the remaining approximately 8,000 megawatts were far enough along that they were able to remain in the queue.
Thank you.
Victoria.
Thank you. Sarah, I was wondering about, on the battery storage side of things. If we were to have like significant leaps in vehicle to grid technology and a lot of EV uptake in the region, how would that interact with concerns?
Yeah, so EVs are something that we plan for in our capacity, energy, loads, and transmission report. There is a transportation component of that forecast that we work very closely with the states to estimate what we think EV adoption will be like. And that does get baked into all of our planning assumptions. So the CELT will be released. It comes out May 1st every year. So we're finalizing that. I think that the final transportation forecast is already available. And we update those assumptions every year to generate that new 10-year look ahead. So that is something that we coordinate with our utilities on, with our state policymakers on, to do our best to estimate what we think uptake will be for EV technologies. And I know Vermont has some managed charging programs. A couple of the utilities offer that sort of incentive for EVs, and that is something that we consider in that forecast as well. All right, are there any more questions?
No, I think we can go to the next slide.
Okay. Well, this is really our last slide. So we'll just end with some closing thoughts. We have demonstrated as a region that nuclear can operate safely and reliably for decades. And as the resource mix changes, our system planners are increasingly trying to account for dispatchability, fuel security, and extreme weather. Advanced nuclear technologies might appear in the future. You are likely hearing the term small modular reactor thrown around quite a bit, but those aren't really commercially viable yet. As you saw, there was nothing proposed in our interconnection queue, so we're not seeing any realistic proposals for that sort of technology in New England yet. We do, of course, remain fuel neutral, and we evaluate all resources based on reliability and system needs. But our states have policy preferences that prioritize low or no emissions. So that's something that nuclear can accommodate. And as far as we're concerned, as the reliability coordinator, the most valuable investment the region can make in terms of long-term reliability is in flexible balancing resources. And the states really value carbon-free and fuel secure. That will help us smooth the variability in weather-dependent generation. So from that perspective, our nuclear units are very valuable to the region and also, I think, to the states for the zero carbon electricity that they can provide. And I will just reference, I've linked here our 2024 economic study. We've cited that including dispatchable resources can really significantly improve efficiency and reliability and reduce capacity needs by more than 15%. That report does also have a really accessible kind of 2-page fact sheet that might be of interest to folks here. So I could share that if that is of interest. And we also conducted a public webinar for which the recording is available on that report, where that finding comes from.
Yeah, so I just had a question, Sarah. Dispatchable, well, maybe I should ask you to define dispatchable.
Yeah, I might defer to Eric on this to make sure that I'm using the correct ISO terminology, but dispatchable is our operators can get on the phone and call that resource and say, we need you to come online or we need you to ramp up production. So a solar facility can't do that because
Yeah.
they are kind of at the whims of whether the sun is shining and what the cloud cover is doing.
Right.
But a gas plant, a nuclear plant can do that.
Well, but what the point that Eric made earlier is that nuclear can't do that very easily because they can't ramp up and ramp down. It takes time. Isn't that so?
Yeah, I'd be happy to jump in here. So when we think about the nuclear plants, while they may be,
We can't hear you very well. Can you get closer to the microphone or something?
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Better, yeah.
Okay. The nuclear plants may bid in zero to the market in order to get dispatch, but they are still under the dispatch control of the ISO. So if we were in a situation where there was more power than was needed, we could give them dispatch instructions that they needed to go offline. We try not to do that, and we have market tools to avoid that situation because it's harder to bring them back right away. But a nuclear plant is under full dispatch control by ISO New England.
So then, if I'm understanding correctly, that means they can go offline quickly, but it takes time for them to come back online.
Yes, I mean, it's a large asset. It doesn't move very quickly, and I would defer to the nuclear operators to talk about the specifics of that. But yes, in general, it's not like a fast start or a peaking plant that can ramp up really quickly and turn off suddenly.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I just want to be clear about it. So they can neither turn off quickly, or I can understand why it takes time to start up again, but can they shut off quickly? Can they go to, for example, their pump storage capacity in order to offload their supply quickly?
Well, they certainly can go off quickly, and they would do that if they were in any type of an emergency situation at the plant. If the plant had a problem and they needed to go down for safety reasons, they could do that. They would notify the ISO right away. They would say, we need to take an emergency outage of this plant. So they do have the ability, but they are not as nimble as the more flexible resources that Sarah was talking about. So in their normal day-to-day operation, they would want to be fully operating up to their full capacity, and they would really only come offline when they are doing their refueling every 18 months or so. So yes, they are dispatchable, but it's a different kind of dispatchability just because of the characteristics of
Right.
how those plants operate.
So I want the final point on this. And so it sounds like really, if we're planning for quickly dispatchable or quickly flexible supply, then something like batteries would be better. Is that true, or is that a simple understanding?
Better is a subjective term. They all have different characteristics. A battery or a pump, even a pump storage hydro facility, is not a source of energy. It is storing energy that's been created by either a nuclear plant or a solar, or just charging from the grid directly. So I think each resource has its attributes that have different value to the grid. And I wouldn't say that one is better than another. Their price may be different at different times. Their runtime might be different. Sarah showed what's in the queue for batteries, and there's a lot of it, but it's short duration battery, lithium ion. Those batteries can only discharge for a couple of hours. Very different from longer duration.
We have our next witnesses here, so we're going to take one more quick question. Rep Kleppner was in line. Are these quick?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, quick.
Do you
Rep Kleppner.
consider utility scale battery storage facilities a dispatchable resource?
Yes. Yeah, we do. We use them in the grid today.
Great. And second question, as you are concerned, looking forward about moving to a winter peak and the competition between home heating for natural gas and electric generation for natural gas, have you calculated when someone switches their home from heating with natural gas to heating with heat pumps, the sort of balance between the increase in their electric demand and the decrease in their demand for natural gas?
Home
ahead, Sarah.
heating, electrification is another component of our annual capacity, energy loads and transmission report that comes out every May. So that is something that we are continually evaluating with our state partners to model the correct adoption rates. So yes, in short, we are doing that calculus and making sure that those numbers are included in the capacity that we think we need to be procuring for to meet electricity need in the future.
Ma'am, my actual question is, does natural gas demand go up or down when someone switches from heating with natural gas to heating with electricity?
I can take that one. So
Sure.
the demand on the grid would go up because you're electrifying something. That individual customer may be using less gas, but it depends on what the grid is being powered by at any given time. If you're electrifying and you're using gas-fired generation to charge batteries and heat pumps, that's would be inconsistent, I think, with what the states are driving at. So that's why the states are trying to bring on renewable and carbon resources to go along with the electrification goals that they have.
Bailey,
Yeah, well, quick question. With this excess power in your low point, do you have the capability of wheeling that power west and south and selling it?
Well, we don't wheel it directly, but market participants in both New England and neighboring regions have the ability to move power from, for example, the New York system into the New England system, or from Quebec. So we manage the flows on the lines to make sure things are reliable and the transmission ties don't get overloaded. But certainly there is power that is moved between regions and across multiple regions. That's been going on for a long time with the power system.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry we were running late, so thanks for your patience. Really appreciate it. And we'll get that language into S202.
Great.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
All righty, thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. All right, our next team. I'm so sorry that we're running late. Thank you for being patient. Okay.
We had an elevator shaft
It was
generating
there.
some thermal energy.
It was their elevator.
Probably.
So who is, would you guys like to take the chair? Okay, great. Is Commissioner Manoli joining us online, or is she not coming today?
No, she's not.
Great. Okay. So I know Representative Campbell has to leave. I missed some of our testimony yesterday, or a lot of our testimony yesterday on the auditor's report. So hopefully folks who were here in the room yesterday for that meeting can help ask some good questions here today.
Be here, but I have to run somewhere else. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Our apple cart was upset this morning.
Yeah.
So
I'll get back.
alrighty, if you could just identify yourselves for the record. And did you submit written testimony?
We have a slide deck that we
Great.
submitted.
Perfect. You want to pull it up?
Oh, Cole.
It's happening.
Yes.
Thanks, Cole.
Okay. Good morning. I am Emily Kasicki. I'm Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Buildings and General Services.
Brian Sewell, State Energy Program Manager with the Department of Buildings and General Services.
Right. All right. Thank you for being here. Over to you.
So we're happy to be here. I will admit I'm a little nervous about our ability to get through all of our slides, but we will see how far we can get. So we came prepared to give you a program summary, high level, talk about the audit and our responses to it, and then we also have slides related to the municipal energy resiliency program.
Great. We don't need to cut it right at noon, I don't think.
Okay.
If folks need to be walking out the door at noon, I do not.
Okay. So, So just a really high level program description and history, and this might be old news to many of you who are familiar with how BGS implements our energy office. But generally, I think of the energy office of being responsible for the state agency energy plan, providing up-to-date emissions data for state buildings, ensuring that state contracts and construction projects leverage the most environmentally friendly goods and services, and in an energy efficient manner, serving as a primary point of contact for other agencies and departments on energy related matters, and then coalitions and boards. And then they also now administer the MERC Municipal Energy Resilience Program. So stemming off of the state agency energy plan, we have our BGS agency implementation plan, and we also have operational procedures for lease space, which were referenced in the audit findings as well. The energy office, I think, is important to understand its size in relation to all that it's charged with and it does accomplish as well. It's very small and mighty. I think of it as two kind of permanent, dedicated, full-time staff, which is its manager, Brian, right here, a coordinator. And then there are two project managers in our design and construction division who are dedicated to working on these projects. And then more recently, there's been the addition of limited service staff to work on the MERC program. So again, it's a really small team. They do coordinate closely with other BGS employees and our operations and maintenance division, our construction division to get things accomplished, but just giving you a sense of the size. And then a little bit of the history. So LinkedIn, sorry, it's okay. LinkedIn to this slide. If you are on it electronically, we have hyperlinked some of the previous annual reports. If you're looking for some additional reading, I know you already have a lot of that. But the program as a whole was established back in 2014 through Act 178. It really consists, and it has grown since when it was established, but it consists of two revolving funds. The Energy Revolving Fund and then the Resource Management Revolving Fund. These, I think of them, like, generally speaking, as for energy efficiency, resource conservation, or renewable energy projects that are expected to and required to generate a life cycle cost benefit. So that's important for how we are going to talk about the program. Think about the program as not only is it going to be an upgrade that's going to provide some sort of energy conservation or renewable or efficiency goal, but it also has to have a cost savings. And that's where some of the audit findings come in, where sometimes there's a tension or we don't always, I think we're more challenged in meeting that cost effectiveness threshold in recent years versus when the project or when the program was established. We also, I just want to share, we carry out our work in other ways. We've expanded to include electric vehicle supply equipment, the EV charging stations that are at state facilities. So that is something this team manages. We also have design guidelines for, again, when we're doing new construction, to make sure that, you know, those energy related principles are carried into our construction work. So that is a really high level drive-by of the program. Brian, would you talk about the SEMP process?
I also just wanted to note that the program is up for reauthorization next year. So we are coming to a point where
SEMP.
It's SEMP, correct?
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sorry, and I saw you had the date highlighted. Can you just, when is it? Yeah.
Next year. So I'm sorry, I didn't go through the history and detail of all the acts and when it's reauthorized, but that is just something to flag, is that currently our energy program is only authorized through 2027. So just flagging that should the desire be to continue it, which we do, it would need to be reauthorized.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the way this program is set up, it's still basically operating and set up in statute as a pilot program, started, as the Deputy Commissioner mentioned, in 2014. So I think it's important, we have on the slide behind me our general 1, 2, 3 step process. So we track energy use through Portfolio Manager, collecting utility bills and fuel bills. We then use that information to generate an energy use intensity number, which comes from Portfolio Manager. Basically tells us this building's a poor performer, and then we go try and tackle an energy audit at that facility. That's step 2. The audit report that we get back is what helps inform us about the measures that we should then be pursuing for projects. So data tracking, auditing, and then the last phase is moving that into a project. So, as I mentioned, operating as a pilot, I think we can agree that energy management and conservation is an established effort by the state, and is a significant concern when buildings are, second highest source of emissions statewide. So as we move into discussion of the audit responses, this is going to show that this is a really good moment to evaluate and reconstitute this program as a core function of building management, especially with the reauthorization coming up next year in order to continue that. Next slide.
About the SEMP, again, we kind of mentioned the other things that SEMP has accomplished, but in addition to our ongoing energy management work, it's been a tool for some innovative efforts. So I will let Brian get into the detail on those, but I just think, again, like Brian shared, this is a good time to be looking at the program, talking about what's changed since 2014, and some of the additional things that we've learned and developed as sort of the groundwork or the landscape has changed since then.
One of the things that's changed is the available technologies that we have to implement in buildings. We mentioned the flexible load management program, because that's an example where by making some tweaks through building controls, which we are working to implement across state buildings, you can integrate your HVAC equipment, your heating and cooling loads within the building with, so you just had ISO New England on, with indicators from the grid and the utilities about when we're going to hit a peak day. We can get that alert about 24 hours in advance, and then make the decision to load shift. So pre-cool, preheat buildings, depending on the season, in advance of that event, in order to then turn off a lot of the compressors and equipment and try and coast thermally through that peak event. By reducing your energy use at those highest peak hours of the day, right? You're helping shave the yearly capacity load, huge cost savings, and you're also limiting the amount of power being called for when we have some of the dirtiest power plants running in the New England grid. So we see that as sort of a twofold benefit. One, we get paid a credit for participating, and then there's a benefit to not running, diesel turbines, right? So that is a good example of how, being a pilot program, we've been able to take advantage of new technologies, and we've expanded from the Waterbury complex to 133 State Street, Bennington, Brattleboro. So we want to continue to enroll facilities. The next one we're looking at is the Williston Public Safety Complex. It's new, so we know the building has a good shell and has geothermal. It makes it a really great candidate. So we're working to enroll that at this point.
And then just a takeaway topic for conversation with the SEMP. And again, those 2 revolving funds that were established back in 2014, like the days of low hanging fruit, as we view it, for cost effective savings measures are really gone. Like there aren't those projects that we had available to us in 2014 where we could go in, change out the lights, and we were going to have a demonstrable cost savings quickly in a well-defined payback period. So again, those are how those funds are structured. And some of the new technology or the projects that we have identified now are much more expensive, might not fit as neatly into those payback criteria or timelines as originally established. But we think they're still good projects. So I just, share that. Anything to add on that point?
No, essentially we're looking at, what are the next phases of technologies? There could be a new era of, quick wins through building controls, right? Being able to do some retro commissioning at facilities, identify where, heating and cooling systems aren't quite calibrated, right? And so on a day-to-day basis, maybe small, but over the course of a year, those savings can add up. So I think there's some opportunities, but as the deputy commissioner said, we're past the point of grabbing that low-hanging savings fruit, and we're trying to see how we can adapt to the landscape as it stands now.
You start with the State House when you start.
Yeah.
Please.
And this room in particular.
This one first, all right, 32.
Make a note. Yeah, Rep. Campbell?
I've got a couple of questions. I'm sorry I had to step out and I've probably missed this. I'm looking back at the slide, the scent process slide, where mentioned energy use tracking is handled by BGS for facilities under your jurisdiction, but then not for other agencies. So I presume you're talking about portfolio manager. You benchmark buildings there or track
That's
usage and benchmarking there. And then the next bullet says something about BGS maintains 3 million square feet of owned facility space. But the auditor mentioned something like 7 million, as I recall. We have a total of 7.9 million square feet of space that the state uses. Of that, about almost 1 million is leased, and then the other 7 million is owned by it. Now I asked the auditor whether that included unconditioned buildings, and he didn't know.
So that gap might include, and again, I'd have to pull out our space book for exact square footages, but so BGS generally owns and manages like office space, state house. We also work in correctional facilities, state hospital, those types of buildings, but there are other building and land owning departments, particularly Agency of Transportation,
Okay, I see.
natural
So it's state-owned, but
resources.
it's not owned by BGS.
Right,
I see.
right. So, and again, that's part of the audit findings that we'll get into of like how we do our work, expanding to other agency and department space. I will say with those revolving loan funds, I mean, we're the primary customer of those programs, right? And so we're the biggest user, especially in recent years of those programs, but they are available to other agencies, departments. Department of Labor also, we don't manage those buildings because of their federal overlay.
Is that for those state-owned buildings though?
I think,
Department of Labor.
Department of Labor, I don't want to give you the wrong answer.
So they're state or federal.
They're state or federal. I do know that the federal government has like an ownership stake in them. And so they're managed differently than other state offices
Right, okay.
and not by us.
Okay, well, that explains the discrepancy anyway, thank you.
Raphael?
Yeah, could you give me the amounts of money that are in the two funds you're working with?
Sure. The State Energy Revolving Fund, or SURF, SMRF, those are our two acronyms. SURF is, and I want to make sure I'm being clear about this. It is it's a capital loan capability through the treasurer's office. So operating less like a bank account and more as a credit facility we can borrow against. And I believe that's why originally some years back there was a move to reduce the maximum amount of ROI simple payback on a project, because that's treasury and it has a connection to the state's bond rating. And so it's different than the SMRF, State Resource Management Revolving Fund, which is at the discretion of the BGS Commissioner's Office and is a $1.5 million fund versus an $8 million credit facility. So big difference between those two.
And those numbers, at least for the SURF, Brian, please correct me if I'm wrong here. I believe those amounts are consistent are the same as when the programs were established back around 2014.
Correct.
So I was at BGS back when when the program was launched, and when we were working with the Treasurer's Office and the legislature to establish this revolving loan program. And I believe it was the $8 million that was set aside. And again, it's a revolving loan program, but that's where some of the decisions were made around payback period, the cost effectiveness requirement, because again, it's functioning as a loan program. And those amounts haven't been increased over time.
If you do courthouses, are the courthouses under your ownership?
The state-owned courthouses are, not the county courthouses,
Just, okay, so the Vaughn County courthouse is under your,
not the county.
okay.
I think we were just getting into audit findings and responses
Yeah.
on page 6.
So just some background, you probably heard all of this yesterday, so I won't spend too much time on it, but the auditor's office announced their audit of the SEM in February 25. Their request for information covered up to fiscal years 2016 to 25. They issued their audit report this past January, made several findings regarding deficiencies in our processes and recommendations. And I'll just say, generally speaking, we agreed with their findings and recommendations. We've outlined plans, steps, and timelines to try to address those deficiencies. Again, sort of our response was designed to address those deficiencies within the program as currently structured, although we did highlight a few areas where, we think that there's room for a conversation about the structure. So we'll get into more detail, but some of those key areas of deficiency, that we took away were how we track and address energy use for those facilities that aren't owned by BGS, and fuel use by vehicles, how we verify energy savings data, the number of the projects completed, and how we establish baselines and report on progress towards the agency energy plan goals. And I'll just say off the top about the number of projects, and just making sure this isn't a slide. Oh, it is. I'll wait till we get there.
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. Now,
So we have next slide, opportunities for improvement. So the first one, and we've already started to talk about it a little bit, is data tracking as well as savings measurement and verification. And I do think it's really important because I think there was a question yesterday about can this be automated, right? Right now, we currently manually, and I say we, it's not just my staff and myself, it's also the nominated staff across partner agencies and departments, and they have let us know over the years that this is sometimes really onerous to be plugging in, reading from a PDF, and then plugging it into a file in Portfolio Manager one by one, right, through all the accounts. Can it be automated? Short answer is yes. Other states have done this. A few years back, BGS had meetings with the portfolio manager, consultants and liaisons from Energy Star, as well as Green Mountain Power, being the biggest investor-owned utility in the state, and for BGS accounts. And we asked about being able to set this up because Energy Star has the protocols to directly receive automatic monthly data from the utilities. At the time, GMP indicated that this was going to be cost prohibitive. And so instead, we went through a sort of backdoor workaround. So we got some additional spreadsheets that cut down on some of the time, but it's still manual. And I'm sure, as you know, anytime you're having multiple people touch spreadsheets, you really increase the risk that something is going to get, missed, or a decimal place moves, or whatever it is, right? It just increases that. And so we would love the ability to do this automatic data sharing at some point.
What year did you have that conversation with GMP?
I'll have to look back at the emails. It was at least 3 years ago that we started looking into this.
Maybe it's time to revisit that conversation.
And we did speak to representatives from the Energy Office in California, being one of the states that had set this up. And I believe they did it through a statutory requirement. On the measurement and verification side, and this I think gets into a little bit the overestimated savings that the auditor's office discussed with you yesterday. We are able to do a lot of estimating and projected savings on the front end through our process where we hire a contractor, they go out, they audit the facility, and they generate a report. I think the piece that we would certainly agree needs to be strengthened, and we would welcome this, is to increase the measurement and verification of those savings on the back end. And that requires resources and structure that doesn't currently exist. We do, when a project closes, so measures are installed, we let Efficiency Vermont know so that they can come out and verify that we installed what we said we would install. What that might miss over the years is if you get a complaint from a building tenant, I'm too hot, I'm too cold, and the maintenance staff are there and they're getting the complaint, they'll go and they'll make sure that person's comfortable, but they might not be realizing that they're changing set points that were specifically designed around a savings regime, outside of changes in fuel price.
Oh,
right,
interesting.
Yeah. Any question on that piece?
No, I
Sure.
just thought it was interesting. So,
Yeah.
you're making an estimate on a sort of perfect world, and then somebody comes in and cranks the thermostat up
Or opens a window.
or opens the window. Right? Did I boil it down to?
Yeah, no, that's perfect.
Really?
That's one example. Something might break and a replacement piece of equipment could get installed. We might not know about it, and it might, not work the way the savings and the project were designed. So there's this piece at the back end, which to do really well and make sure that we are monitoring over the years that we're saving what we said we would.
Right.
It requires some resources to set the program up that way. Especially as technology is changing, and there's a whole education component that I'm responsible for as well, working with design and construction, operations and maintenance, their maintenance districts, building supervisors, to try and help them understand. And the load management pilot has been really helpful, but I think there's a lot more to do on the back end. That's a never-ending process, right? Staff changes, do a new training, etc. So I would say we don't currently have the resources to do that level of measurement and verification. As the deputy commissioner mentioned, it's myself and a coordinator. So we're a small but mighty team. But there is certainly a lot more we can be doing on the back end.
Yeah, I had a question too about estimates of savings. The table that was in the auditor's report, and if you have it printed out there, but I'm looking at page 24, I think it is. No, it's labeled page 18. Look at the PDF of it. Exhibit 8. So the table shows DGF lifetime dollar savings, less maintenance savings, EVT estimated lifetime savings, and then overstatement of savings and overstatement percentage. One of the things that's not clear here is, and they didn't have, and I mentioned this to the deputy auditor, we don't know what the estimated costs were originally, and then the actual costs, which might give us an indication of whether the scope of the project changed. So the estimated savings were based on a scope that wasn't actually implemented. So there are a couple of projects listed here, the Middlebury Courthouse and the Brattleboro Courthouse, that where the overstatement is 240%, 300%, suggests to me that the project, most likely the project changed, but there's no way of knowing that. And I wonder if you got into that at all when you were working with the auditor's office.
We did. So that's a great example where, as I mentioned, we're here in Montpelier. We have maintenance districts across the state. And we have our two project managers under design and construction, funded by Efficiency Vermont. Their job is to install and then work with us to update our GRITS reporting, which tracks, the measures specific to that project. But if something doesn't get installed and we're not aware that a change was made, right, I certainly will acknowledge there are communication challenges between divisions, I think in any department. But that's an area where, part of our new standard operating procedures, which we're working with design and construction and maintenance to update in response to the audit report. How can we better close some of those communication gaps, training gaps, knowledge gaps, so that if something changes, we know it's getting recorded on the final stage in our tracking in that efficiency. Vermont has been made aware. And then if something happens, as we indicated, 2-3 years out, and there's an equipment change, making sure we circle back. How did that change project 20 from 3-4 years ago? Part of that is difficult with areas of high turnover, right? We know that will also just disrupt part of the processes, and including data entry from other departments and agencies.
Yeah. Okay, great. So actually, no question about this. This is all challenging stuff. Trying to get better at it.
So I think we're on the second opportunities for improvement,
Yeah.
unless there's other questions.
Just one more note, like again, and our audit response, written response to the audit is attached to an appendix to the auditor's report, starting on page 33, or 32. So again, won't go through all of those in detail, but again, we did have a response to every finding, again, where we generally agreed and set a path for our plan forward. But one example we covered on that previous slide was we weren't updating reports on a biennial basis as required. So that's, again, we commit to updating our SAP report, for this year, and being more mindful of our requirements to update reporting. Updating the program statute and baselines to better align with state targets. So this is where we agree. We will work with our partner agencies and departments to review historic consumption and develop recommendations for adopted baselines. Again, that's something we're committing to this year. But that's where we had a discrepancy between baselines set for the SAP and previous statute.
One other opportunity that we have here, I think, especially with the moment arriving next year to reauthorize the program in some form, is to look at, does the goal of just saving a set amount of dollars every year, 150,000, does that really get us to where the state is committed to going? And what we've seen in talking to AOT and ANR and our partner agencies, and they're all part of this too, right? Everyone sort of knows, like, that's really not going to help us achieve the level of emissions reduction. And where that actually impacts us on the road of projects is if we are, and this gets into project bundling, the second bullet here, if we just go in and sweep through all of the LED lighting conversions that we can, and we don't worry about touching anything else, no heating systems, no cooling systems, because they're more expensive. We're just going for quick wins. We can do that, but we've historically bundled those measures with measures that are more expensive. Like in the case of Middlesex Central Services, we replaced the heating system with a biomass system. It really drained what we had in the fund, the State Resource Revolving Fund. But it was deemed the right decision because it was going to, one, replace aging infrastructure, but two, improve emissions for that facility. And I think having the ability to really reevaluate where we're going based on the state's set targets for emissions reduction, this is an opportunity to look at that and see if just a straight requirement on saving dollars is really the right method, or if we need to take a different approach.
Because in that example, right, that replacement standing alone wouldn't get us to the required payback in the time frame required, right? It's an expensive project. It's not going to have that quick hit on dollar savings, and that's where we think it's a good thing to do. We think it's the right thing to do to meet energy goals. But it is a bit at odds with that, again, payback requirement.
Yeah.
So another flaw in that, and I'm wondering how you calculate this, is if you take a dollar assessment value, then your assessment is completely based on the market price of very volatile fuels. Like if you do an assessment 3 months ago compared to fuel prices now, you get very different outcomes. So I guess that's more of a statement than a question, but when you're doing $150,000, when you're trying to meet a threshold, that's that's over the lifetime of the project or
Those are required first year annual savings.
first year?
Yes.
Savings. So. Okay.
So I think unless there's other questions on the project bundling, I think we would summarize that by saying, yeah, we want to reserve the right to continue to look at project effectiveness through that lens.
Staffing, as noted in the auditor's report, there was a pretty sharp decline in the number of projects happening. I mean, I'll say there were a variety of factors for that, right? Like projects being more complicated, et cetera, but also VGS has had staffing challenges for this program over the last 4 years. And then again, increases in project costs generally. So we were really excited that as of January 2026, we did fill those 2 dedicated project manager roles, which are in our design and construction division. It was a really long road.
Only one of the roles.
One
Just
of the roles. And so again, that will help tremendously. And again, we do have other program staff that aren't the dedicated folks who can do work as well. So it's prioritizing, and we think we'll be able to move forward more meaningfully looking forward.
Yeah, if I can just add, thank you, Deputy Commissioner. Part of what I think makes recruitment difficult, I know because we have heard from design construction who's hiring the project managers that, again, going back to this being a pilot program, there's a limited service component to the role. And that's true of my coordinator as well, who does most of the data analytics and reporting and helping me in that regard. Unless the program is reauthorized, you won't know if he has a job next year. And asking somebody to commit to the state for a limited amount of time is tough. And so it makes it difficult to challenge for recruitment and retaining people to get the work done. And so the position that's currently open is one of those limited service positions. And that's just, challenging reality. But I think for the lease space, we've been meeting with the leasing team to work on tackling that estimated 1 million square feet of office space that we have. I'm sure folks know that the challenges in trying to you can't quite force a building owner, right? That isn't us to do measures, but there's a lot that we're trying to investigate in terms of can we find some quick win champions, some landowners. This is what the leasing team is looking into now. Who are some folks who can demonstrate why these projects are important, even at state office space that we lease instead of own, and how they can benefit from pursuing measures like this. So that's something we're actively working on right now.
I have a question about that. Is your responsibility to achieve energy savings in leased space part of the statute? Like, do you have a statutory obligation to do that when we set up SEM? Did the legislature require that, or is that something you guys took on?
It's a requirement. And there was a policy, to be fair, there's a policy drafted back in 2014 regarding lease space, but it just became impossible to implement because we don't have authority over those.
Seems like that part would be challenging.
Correct.
It is challenging, and given limited resources, like that just hasn't been the focus, right? It's been focusing on that owned inventory first for a variety of reasons. That said, fully acknowledge that per the audit report, that's like a deficiency of ours. We had those procedures developed in 2014 that have not been fully used or embraced. So that's, Brian is refocusing attention with our property management team to see, what we can do in that space to improve.
All right. So you have ideas or policy guidelines about how to get there.
We do. We do, which need to be updated, right? Like they're old. Yeah. Vehicle emissions. And again, just for background, BGS manages the state fleet program, fleet management services within BGS. However, there is a large amount of vehicles that are not under our coverage. Typically, we have the passenger fleet. So if you need to get a motor pool or an agency is leasing a car, for client visits, that is under us. Some of the vehicles like AOT vehicles, public safety, they also have a large number of vehicles, which we don't directly oversee. But Brian has been working with fleet management for new operating procedures so that we can better capture and report out use of transportation fuels.
Yeah, we actually just met with the fleet manager yesterday, and they let us know that there's a new reporting tool within WEX. WEX has been capturing the BGS fleet, gas card recordings on cost. And so there's a whole new capability that looks like we're going to be able to have access to, which could get into some emissions reporting. So we're really excited to work with the fleet manager and her team on how to use that in upgrading our current procedures for capturing fleet. The piece that we still need to work on, I think, beyond that is, as the Deputy Commissioner mentioned, going through all the other agencies that have vehicles, right? It's same thing. We want to be able to make sure we're all saying the same thing, seeing the same thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Rep Bailey and then Campbell.
So I believe Rep Klutner, correct me if I'm wrong, we were looking at, he was asking about actual kilowatt hours when you do a job, what it was, what it ends up being. Didn't you ask something about the usages rather than the dollars?
Yeah.
To see if the project, how that project to us would, or to me, would say, well, geez, we went in, the thing was using 50,000 kilowatt hours, and after you did your job, it's down to 25,000. To me, that shows a pretty good success. But we're just seeing dollars. And do you track that?
We do track that.
It came up even more in the context of gallons of fuel versus dollar, because you could be reducing your gallons and having your dollars go up. And we care about the dollars, but we're also interested in the gallons.
I think it's also important to note, again, just because ISO New England was just in here, even if KWH consumption remains the same, but you've moved it to a different time of the day, I mean, that there's still benefits there, right? And so that's the modern grid that we're dealing with today. Is we could use the same amount, but if you move it to when renewables are peaking on the grid versus when it's dirtiest, right? There's a benefit to that as well, as in addition to getting paid the credit and using that as part of the ability to pay for the programs.
It would just seem that it would give a better picture rather than just the dollars that you're trying to capture. But
Yeah, dollars and energy units would be helpful.
Repel?
Could you estimate the duration of your leases on your lease property?
So it depends. We have a variety of leases across the state, from your large office at National Life to, a smaller office in a more remote location. So again, it really depends on the need of the agency or department that's the tenant. I would say, we generally try to avoid really long terms. So oftentimes we'll start with like a 5-year term with renewals. There are some longer term ones, especially if we've invested a lot of fit up in the space.
Well, that was you may have to rearrange the wall structures in a facility to accommodate the offices you need. And so rather than working out of a hotel room for somebody,
right,
for a very short term, so that the with only a 5-year lease, the incorporation of energy improvements, you may not be there long enough.
Right.
I see a lot of slides on Mark, but we're not going to see if I get to that today. But I guess I just wanted to summarize what you've talked about today and the audit report. First of all, gratifying that BGS reviewed the audit report and agreed with many of the findings and is taking steps to try to make changes. That's a great thing. I guess I will say that the overall picture that emerges to me from the audit report is not consistent focus on energy performance in your projects, in your buildings or in the projects that you're doing on buildings, and that's what I'm speaking also from a 1 year or 2 year term on corrections institutions where we got to hear from building general services all the time, and that's what I would. And I know it's hard to change things, and you have people who've run projects there for 30 years and they know what they're doing and all of that. But it is really important to have somebody like Brian with an energy lens on looking at your buildings and looking at your projects to be able to, as they are being designed, not just once they're in construction, once they're done, and in order to really take advantage of the opportunities that are there, not only for improving energy performance, but also, as I used to say when I was in weatherization, what we really do is improve the comfort, improve the health and safety, improve the durability. If we do all that correctly, we'll also improve the energy performance. And you mentioned being held to a metric of dollar savings, which is a really crude metric. Totally. But I think it's sort of the same thing applies if you're focused on the energy performance and the building performance, then the savings will follow.
So I will say, like, I hear you, and there are constraints and limitations to the energy office, really of two, and then of our work, which is diverse. I will say the auditor's report really focuses on the SEM, which is those two revolving funds, and doesn't totally capture the whole picture of the work that we do in this space, right? So like our design standards, the way that we work with design and construction when they are building something new, that isn't necessarily captured in this. So again, hear you and accept that. I don't think the audit, because it's focusing on a specific portion of what we do, it doesn't capture all of it, but there's certainly room for us to do more. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, and I certainly see weaknesses in the audit report, which I mentioned too. The deputy auditor here. Yeah, so
yeah,
I would like to know more than they probably is more behind the scenes than was actually presented in the report. But yeah, it just seems to me that we have room for improvement here.
Absolutely.
And we as a state own a lot of buildings, and it would be great to be really on top of this part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. Good.
How much of your real estate is unoccupied? And start there.
Very little. So currently, right here in Montpelier, there's a few historic buildings across the street that were flooded, which are currently unoccupied. We have the Windsor Southeast State Correctional Facility, which was decommissioned years ago. But those are vacant buildings from a former correctional facility. We also have 108 Cherry Street, which was vacated by the Department of Health a few years ago, and it's currently under a purchase and sale agreement, but that building is currently vacant. We also have two other buildings right here in Montpelier, one on Baldwin Street, which is on the market. The other actually is occupied. So those are the only ones really that I can identify. So I do know there's been conversation or perception that the state has a lot of vacant space. That's not the reality. Certainly in the last several years, you've had buildings that are not fully utilized. Especially as
when we go over here for meetings, the pavilion, there's a lot of space in there.
So absolutely, there's been space that's not utilized, depending on the tenant and their hybrid work environment. That said, they're not vacant. They are utilized. So you might walk in on a day when it's not a core day of a particular agency or department and it looks like it's totally empty, but we actually do track utilization. And can say like, perhaps this building isn't being used to its full capacity, but it is still used.
Brooke Kleppner?
And this may have been somewhere in the information we got, but can you remind me, how many buildings total does the state own?
I am going to send you one of my favorite documents. It's called the Space Book.
Okay.
And it is, I am the biggest champion of this book because it is a document BGS puts together every year that has all state properties owned, leased, land holdings, statewide, not just BGSs. So it gives you square footages and addresses of everything. So I'm going to send it. I'll share it with the committee assistant.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Love to see that.
Yeah, it's really interesting if you're looking for some reading. Okay.
So I'm feeling like just reading the room. I don't want to inconvenience you, but would you want to come back some other time and walk us through MERP?
Sure.
I mean, you've got a lot of slides, a lot of great information. I don't want to blow off MERP. And I don't want to rush through it. I hate to ask you to come back, but could we get you rescheduled for MERP?
Absolutely, we'd be happy to. We're here. We're here to share information with you.
Is that okay with everybody? I don't want to blow through MERP at
Yeah.
warp speed.
Where's your office?
It's right at 133. We're on the 5th floor. Actually, I'll say we are across the state. BGS is in all corners of the state.
The people who have to come back to this room.
Oh.
We are on the 5th floor right next door.
Okay,
So,
great.
yeah.
Well, if that works for you guys, we can go off live. And our committee assistant will reach out and get you guys scheduled for round 2. Okay.
Sounds great.
So
Fantastic.
thanks for being here. Thanks for all the time you put into your slides. It's great.
Thank you.